She was particularly kind to the sort of people who would bring the tea, or the sort of person who would open the door, a flunky of some sort. Very good with children, and if you had no power or no particular importance, she was always immensely kind.
Hi, I'm Amy Payne with the Heritage Foundation. Thanks for joining us in the Green Room today. Robin Harris was a friend and confidant of former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher for 30 years. He's now the author of a book called Not for Turning about Lady Thatcher, and today he joins us to share some of his memories. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Not at all, delighted to be here.
So after Lady Thatcher's death, you said that she transformed the British political landscape fundamentally and probably irreversibly. How was she able to accomplish this?
Well, by having a very strong will, by having clear principles, and by winning 3 general elections. Because to have a strong will and clear principles without actually being successful isn't enough. And she managed, obviously, to convince the British people on 3 successive occasions that she was the right person and the Conservative Party was the right party to be in charge of Britain's affairs. I mean, she changed Britain because she succeeded and because she allowed Britain to succeed, both as far as our economy is concerned and indeed our position in the world.
That sounds like some kind of secret sauce that American politicians would love to figure out, because as we've talked about recently at Heritage, you have to win the argument.
Yes.
How do you think she went about doing that? You've talked about convincing people 3 times.
Well, obviously your argument must be relevant to the circumstances, and the circumstances in the 1970s, when we were trying to get to power, were that Britain was failing economically. We had overmighty trade unions, we had far too much regulation, we had high inflation, we had large numbers of strikes. It was said that you couldn't even rule the country unless you had the agreement of the trade unions to do so. The West was believed to be on the retreat in the face of the Soviet Union and its allies. These were very bad times, and people knew that if Britain continued to decline at that rate, we were finished. So what she was saying was, Britain does not need to be finished. We can do better. We can draw on our national resources, and we can make Britain recover economically. We do not have to accept that socialism is the only answer. We can liberate individuals to create wealth, and we can see that the state is put back in its box.
And how do you think that subsequent prime ministers have they been good caretakers of her legacy?
Well, better than they might have been, because she really did change the way in which people looked at Britain's economy, really. I mean, socialism is utterly discredited. By the time she left office in 1990, nobody was going to bring back the kind of socialism that we had in the 1970s, or indeed that we'd had in the 1960s.
We know that you were very close to Lady Thatcher.
Yes.
Would love to hear about the traits that you saw in her, kind of behind the scenes, and the things that you admired.
Well, I suppose there are 2 things. She was completely honest. Like a lot of very honest people, when they tell small white lies, they're even extremely bad at those. That's a very good sign that somebody is honest. And she was always honest. She was honest about her opinions, and she listened to people's opinions. Didn't mean that she was going to agree with them. She would talk you down sometimes, but if you persisted, she would listen. And if there was validity in your opinion, and it was backed up by facts and experience, she would change her own mind. So she was an honest, open sort of person. And she was also extremely kind, personally kind, and particularly kind to people, the sort of people who get trampled on. In other words, she was particularly kind to the sort of people who would bring the tea, or the sort of person who would open the door, a flunky of some sort. Very good with children. And if you had no power or no particular importance, she was always immensely kind. And if people fell on hard times, she was extremely financially generous, far more financially generous than was known about. And she would discreetly find out who actually was going to be alone at Christmas in London, and these people, without ever having solicited it, would find themselves with an invitation to Chequers. Now that's a sort of kindness which matters. She could also be extremely cruel, and she could be extremely harsh. But I'm afraid those are the 2 sides of her personality. But Basically, those people who got into trouble really deserved it, and including myself on occasion. And she had a very warm heart. That's what I remember of her.
Now, you also mention in the book that she could be superstitious at times.
She was superstitious, yes. I mean, she had what she thought of as her lucky pearls and that sort of thing. And I don't know how much she really believed in this sort of thing, but she certainly didn't. She was careful about these matters, and she did actually think that she was a lucky politician, and I think she probably was. I mean, she was, after all, quite lucky in 1984 when the IRA, with their bomb in October 1984 in the Grand Hotel, tried to kill her. If she had been in the bathroom rather than her sitting room working at 2:10 a.m. on that Friday morning, she would have been dead. That's lucky for all of us.
We should all get some pearls.
Yes. Well, it wasn't just the pearls. I think perhaps. Well, anyway, she was certainly lucky.
You've told us so much about some sides of her that we may not have seen from the outside. What's something that you think Americans should look for in their own leaders based on what you saw from her leadership?
Well, you want to have people who are right, I mean with a small r. What I mean is that their analysis of the world, of the way the world works, has to be correct. They've got to understand, as far as America is concerned, why America is different, why America, as the phrase is exceptional. They've got to understand those values which America almost uniquely can transmit to the world and not despise them or disparage them. They've got to understand that although America can't be the policeman of the world, it is the great power, and it's got to accept those responsibilities. In other words, I think that the person who's got to run America has got to love America, understand America, and understand the world and the way the world works. And that's a very broad philosophical fact. But if people's basic principles are wrong, if their basic outlook is false, they should not be entrusted to run a great country.